still can't explain what happened during my night shifts at St. Mary's Hospital a few months ago. I was just trying to balance my job with taking care of my daughter. I figured I was used to the quiet nights after working there for a while. But on this night, everything felt different. The old hallways were dark, and I felt a chill that seemed to settle into my bones. Around 3 a.m., I went to check on room 204. As I walked past an empty room, I felt something watching me from inside. I stopped and stared at the door. It felt like there was someone lying in wait within the shadows. I shook my head and continued on. I was tired, and maybe I was just imagining things. The next shift, things got weirder. I heard whispers coming from that same room. I stopped outside trying to listen. The voices were soft but clear, like someone was having a conversation. I felt my heart race. I couldn't make out the words, but I wasn't alone in feeling uneasy. Was it my imagination? I returned to my patients, but the whispers stayed with me. On the third night, I saw something that made my stomach drop. At the end of the hall, I spotted a figure in a long white dress. It looked outdated, like something from a different time. I turned to look closer, but it vanished. There was nothing but darkness. I tried to convince myself that I was seeing things, but the feeling wouldn't go away. When I got back to the nurse's station, patients started talking about strange sights. 2. One elderly woman insisted she saw a nurse from the 60s. Others mentioned shadows darting past them. I couldn't dismiss their words. I had my own experiences. Something was off, and I started to feel a deep unease. During my break, I thought I should check room 204. I pushed the door open slowly, my heart racing. A cold gust of air rushed past me as I stepped inside. The room was empty, but something felt wrong. I wanted to leave, but I stayed rooted to the spot. Suddenly, I sensed something behind me. I turned quickly, but there was no one there. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break free from my chest. I glanced down the hall and saw the figure in the white dress again, disappearing into the dark. I sprinted back to the nurse's station, my legs feeling weak. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible lingered in that hospital. I kept asking myself if it was stress or fatigue. I didn't know. I wanted to talk to someone, but everyone else seemed normal. Maybe it was all in my head, but I still don't have any answers. Those encounters haunt me. What was that figure? Why did I hear the whispers? I wish I could explain it all. I think about it every shift now. That night, the air felt heavier than ever, as if the building itself was holding its breath. My shift started just like any other, but I couldn't shake the unease from my previous encounters. I was on high alert, my senses tuned to every creak and whisper. Around midnight, I was checking in on patients, their rooms quiet and serene, but something tugged at my mind. I had to know what was happening in room 204. I had avoided it since my last visit, but I realized I couldn't keep running from my fears. As I made my way to the door, a faint sound echoed down the hall. A soft giggle stopped me cold. I glanced around. The corridors were empty. My palms felt sweaty. I pushed down the anxiety as I approached the room I had dreaded. I reached for the doorknob, hesitating for just a second. The door creaked open, revealing darkness. I stepped inside and flicked the light switch. The room lit up, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. A neatly made bed, a single window covered by curtains, and medical equipment in the corner. But the atmosphere felt thick, almost alive. That's when I noticed the mirror on the wall. It was clouded with age, but I could see my reflection staring back at me, eyes wide with uncertainty. Suddenly, the lights flickered and dimmed. For a split second, my reflection changed. I saw the white-dressed figure standing right behind me, a haunting smile on her face. I whipped around, but no one was there. Panic surged. I stumbled back and knocked over a chair, the echo loud and jarring in the silence. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It was just my mind playing tricks, I told myself. I needed to leave this room. As I turned to exit, the whispers started again, louder and more frantic. "Help us, please," they begged, echoing in my ears. My heart raced as I stumbled out of the room, slamming the door behind me. What was happening? I rushed back to the nurse's station, my breath shallow. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I approached my colleague Susan, who had been at the hospital for years. Her demeanor seemed calm, but the line between normality and fear began to blur. "Have you heard anything strange?" I asked, my voice trembling. She looked at me, her gaze hardening. "What do you mean?" I hesitated but told her about the figures, the whispers, the overwhelming fear. As I spoke, her expression changed. "You're not the first to say this. A few other staff members have reported similar experiences. It's been happening for a while now." I felt a chill at her words. "What do you think it is?" "I don't know. Some say the hospital has a past, a darkness that clings to these walls. But no one wants to talk about it. Everyone hopes it goes away." Just then, the lights flickered again. The air grew cold. I turned back to Susan, but her eyes were wide, frozen in fear. "What now?" I whispered. Then, everything went dark. The emergency lights kicked in, casting eerie shadows across the room. I felt my skin crawl as that familiar figure appeared at the end of the hallway, her white dress glowing faintly in the dim light. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. The whispers grew louder, enveloping me. They were calling out, begging for someone to listen. What could it possibly mean? I finally found the courage to step forward and confront whatever this was. But then, I realized I might be too late. Chapter 2. I stood frozen in place, staring at the figure before me. The dim emergency lighting barely illuminated her features, but I could see her eyes dark and hollow, yet filled with a deep sorrow. Part of me wanted to flee, to bolt down the hallway and pretend I had never seen anything, but another part felt compelled to uncover the truth. "Help us," she whispered again, her voice soft yet piercing. It echoed in my ears, mixing with the chaos of my thoughts. I took a shaky step forward, heart pounding, drawing on some hidden courage. "What do you want?" I managed to call out, my voice barely above a whisper in response. She tilted her head slightly, as if she were judging my resolve. That action sent a chill through me. Then, she slowly raised a finger, pointing toward room 204. I swallowed hard. Was she trying to guide me back there? I glanced toward Susan, who seemed equally paralyzed by fear. "Susan, we have to get out of here," I urged, but she didn't move. "Do you hear them?" she murmured, eyes locked on the figure. "They're in pain." I could hear the whispers more clearly now, the pleas rising from the depths of darkness. It was maddening, feeling the weight of those cries, the combined grief of lost souls. I turned back to the ghostly figure. She nodded slightly, urging me on with her eyes. There was no denying it. I had to understand what was happening. I forced myself to walk past Susan and headed down the hall to room 204. The dread settled heavily in my stomach, but curiosity pushed me forward. As I reached the door, I hesitated, remembering the chaos that had erupted in there. Still, the figure's presence loomed large in my mind, urging me onward. With a deep breath, I turned the doorknob and stepped inside. The same sense of thick air enveloped me, but the atmosphere felt different this time, charged with something electric. I flicked the light switch, and the sterile room came alive, revealing the quiet spaces just as before. But now, my eyes fell onto a pile of old papers pushed into the corner. I felt drawn to them, heart racing as I approached. The papers were barely recognizable, faded and digested by time. I picked one up and squinted at the handwriting. My heart skipped as I realized they were patient records. Names, dates, and what was this? Details of treatments. My hands trembled as I sifted through more sheets. Some patients had been treated for odd ailments similar to the whispers I had been hearing. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed behind me. I spun around, breath catching in my throat. The door slammed shut, trapping me inside. A chill swept through the room, and I felt the temperature drop drastically. "Help us, please." The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a storm. That voice, not the figure now, but another, sounded familiar. Then, I realized who it was. My heart sank. It was a past patient. I remembered their face, the stories they told me during their stay. They had suffered deeply, and their life had slipped away too soon. "No, you can't," I shouted, panic rising. But the whispers grew louder, drowning out my words. Filling the air with desperation, I fumbled for the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. My heart raced as I felt a presence behind me again. When I glanced back, the figure in white had returned, closer this time, her face filled with sorrow and urgency. Then, everything fell silent. The whispers ceased, the world felt still. And that S when I saw it hidden beneath the papers, a small tarnished key. It gleamed weakly in the dim light, and somehow I knew it was important. What did it unlock? I reached for it, grasping it tightly in my fist, just as the door creaked open. The hallway stood empty, the figure had dissipated. But I knew my night was far from over. Something dark was waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 3. I stepped into the hallway, the sense of urgency still pulling at me. The key felt cold against my palm, its weight a constant reminder of what I had just experienced. I could still hear the echoes of the pleas and the whispers, remnants of those lost souls haunting my thoughts. Susan was leaning against the wall, eyes wide with fear. "What happened?" she asked, panic creeping into her voice. I shook my head, unsure of how to explain. The words wouldn't come. I didn't want to frighten her further. "Let us just move. We need to get help," I finally said, forcing my legs to carry me down the hallway. The eerie quiet was unsettling. Typically, the hospital was filled with sounds, machines beeping, distant voices, wheels rolling over linoleum. But now, it was just us and the lingering dread that as we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision. Were they real or just tricks of the dim lighting? I held the key tightly, hoping it would somehow bring us luck. We made our way toward the nurse's station, hoping to find someone who could help. The station was empty, the lights flickering occasionally overhead. I felt an odd itch at the back of my neck. My instincts told me to turn around, but I fought the impulse. "Where is everyone?" Susan whispered as she pulled the duty log from the counter. The pages were ragged, filled with notes from the previous shifts. "This doesn't make sense. We were just here." And just like that, a sudden cold shot through the room. I turned to face the entrance, my gut tightening as I noticed the door swinging slightly. I glanced back at Susan, who looked equally confused. "Did you feel that?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, my gaze darting around. I noticed the charts on the wall began to sway, as if disturbed by an unseen force. Then, out of nowhere, a low moan echoed through the corridor, a sound filled with despair. My heart raced as I searched for the source. I stepped closer to Susan, willing myself to be brave. "Stay close," I whispered, but my words felt hollow. The moaning grew louder, and I could hear it clearly now, an agonized cry that seemed to seep through the very walls of the hospital. Taking a deep breath, I moved toward the sound, drawn in spite of my fear. Susan followed reluctantly. The cries led us down another hallway, away from the safety of the nurse's station. We approached a room at the end of the corridor. The door swung open, revealing a dimly lit space that looked untouched. It was eerily quiet inside, but the atmosphere felt thick with confusion. The sheets were rumpled, and a single chair sat in the corner, facing the window. As I stepped inside, I looked for signs of anything unusual, and that S when Susan gasped. I turned toward her, and she pointed at something on the floor. My stomach dropped. There, in the middle of the room, lay a hospital bracelet, the name faded but still partially legible. It was the same name as one of the patients from the records. My pulse quickened. "I think we've stumbled onto something much worse," I said, suddenly realizing we weren't just dealing with whispers and shadows. Before I could digest the implications, a chilling laugh echoed from behind me. I spun around, eyes wide, but the room was empty. The laughter faded into echoes, and something inside me screamed to run. "Let us go," I said, my voice urgent. I grabbed Susan's arm, but as we turned to leave, I saw her expression shift from fear to horror. "How did you get in here?" a voice whispered behind us. Chapter 4. Who are you? I managed to croak out, my voice barely a whisper. The question hung in the air, thick with tension. I turned slowly, terrified of what I might see. There, in the doorway, stood a figure cloaked in shadows. I couldn't make out their features, but the sense of dread that enveloped us was palpable. My heart hammered in my chest, and I instinctively moved closer to Susan. "Let us just go," she whispered urgently, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. The figure took a step forward, and for a brief moment, a slant of pale moonlight illuminated their face. I squinted, trying to focus, but the light flickered, casting them back into darkness. "You shouldn't be here," the figure said, their voice like gravel. "Why? What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaking. I was desperate to understand. "They're watching," the figure replied, a hint of panic in their tone. "You need to leave before it's too late." Panic surged through me. Who is watching? I tried to sound brave, but my throat felt dry. Before the figure could answer, Susan pulled on my arm. "We can't stay here," she urged, eyes wide with fear. I nodded, knowing we had to get out. "Wait," I called out, but the figure was already retreating into the shadows. Just like that, they vanished, leaving behind an unsettling silence. I exchanged a glance with Susan, and without another word, we bolted for the door. As we stepped into the hallway, the faint moaning returned, louder this time, wrapping around us like a shroud. I hesitated, glancing back at the room, bracing myself for something to emerge. "Go. We need to find a way out," Susan insisted, pulling me along. We rushed down the corridor, glancing over our shoulders as the air grew thicker. Each step felt heavy. It seemed the moaning escalated, a cacophony of despair that echoed off the walls, mixing with the panic rising in my chest. We stumbled upon another hallway, less familiar than the one we had just fled. I caught sight of flickering light at the end, an inviting glow. "There," I gasped, pointing toward the light. We sprinted toward it, hope sparking in my chest. But as we approached, the doors began to slam shut, one after another, sealing us in this nightmare. "No, no," I cried out, and Susan's grip on my arm tightened. We were running out of time. We reached the last door, and with a burst of energy, I yanked it open. It led to the hospital's basement, a long stairwell descending into darkness. Chilling wind rushed up to greet us. I hesitated, fear clawing at my throat. "What do we do?" I whispered, panting heavily. "Down?" she urged, and without thinking, I took the first step down, one foot clinging to the hope that the darkness might hide our pursuers. As we descended, the moans turned into cries of agony, a chorus of voices growing louder behind us. The air around us shifted, shifting from fear to something cold. And that's when I felt it. A hand brushed against my back, cold and impossibly light. Chapter 5. The touch sent a shockwave through me. I whipped around, but the stairwell was still empty, just dark concrete and shadows. "Did you feel that?" I asked, my voice tremulous. "Feel what?" Susan asked, her eyes wide. "The hand. Something touched me." I was breathing fast, my heart pounding like a drum. She shook her head, looking back up the stairs, where the moans and cries continued to echo. "We can't stand here. We need to keep moving." I nodded, though terror still gripped me. Together we pressed on, our footfalls echoing in the narrow space. Each step deeper into the basement felt like a deliberate march into uncertainty. The air grew colder as we descended further, swirling around like a fog. I caught a faint glimmer ahead, a dim light flickering against the wall. "Do you see that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice low, but a tremor betrayed me. "Yeah. But let us be careful," she said, squeezing my hand. As we reached the bottom, the flickering light stopped, plunging us into darkness momentarily before a fluorescent fixture flickered back to life. When it stabilized, it revealed a long, empty room lined with cabinets and medical equipment. "Where are we?" I whispered, scanning the space. It felt like a forgotten corner of the hospital, a place long since abandoned. "We need to find a way out of here," Susan said, tension in her voice. Suddenly, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. My heart leaped as I turned. A figure loomed in the shadows across the room, half hidden by a rusted gurney. I squinted into the dim light. Was it the same figure from earlier? Hello? I called, my voice shaky. The figure didn't respond. I edged forward, but the floor creaked beneath me like it might give way. Susan, stay back, I said, my instincts screaming at me. My gaze never left the lurking figure. Then, without warning, it stepped into the light. It was an apparition, draped in a hospital gown soaked in something dark. My stomach churned at the sight. The figure opened its mouth, but no sound came out. Instead, a wave of despair crashed over me. Run, back up the stairs, Susan screamed, tugging at my arm. We turned and fled, racing back towards the staircase. My mind raced and fear clawed at my insides as the cries escalated behind us. We nearly tripped on the last few steps, desperate to escape whatever horror chased you as we burst back into the hallway. The moaning morphed into a chaotic scream. I stumbled, nearly losing my footing. What is happening? I gasped, pain radiating through my chest with each breath. Just keep moving, Susan shouted, pulling me toward what looked like an exit at the end of the hall. But as we got closer, the door began to close, phantom hands pushing it shut. Are you kidding me? I yelled, lunging forward in a last-ditch effort to catch it. I felt a cold touch at my back again, suffocating. That S when the lights went out. The darkness enveloped us, and all I could hear was Susan's ragged breaths and my own pounding heart. I reached for her, fingers trembling as I fought to stay calm. Where are you? I said, panic bubbling to the surface. I'm right here. Find the door, she urged, her voice strained that I stumbled forward, feeling for any hint of light, a wall, anything. And that S when I felt something grab my wrist, squeezing tight that I froze. Let go of me, I shouted, fighting against the grip. But the response was chilling, a whisper that chilled me to the core. You shouldn't have come back. Chapter 6. The voice echoed again, chillingly close. I pulled against the grip on my wrist, my heart thundering in my chest. Sparse light flickered from the emergency exit sign overhead, casting eerie shadows around us. Susan's breath was frantic, each gasp a reminder of how close we were to whatever horror lurked in this basement. Get off me, I yelled, panic rising. The grip tightened, and I felt an unnatural chill creeping up my arm. Suddenly, the hold released. I staggered back, gasping for breath. What was that? I managed to croak, shaken to my core. I don't know. We need to find a way out. Susan was still close, but she looked wild, her eyes darting around. I focused, trying to shake off the dread clawing at me. The door. We have to get to the door. Disoriented, I stumbled forward into the dark, trying to retrace my steps to the exit. The air felt thick, making each breath harder. That way, Susan cried, pointing toward where the faint glow of the exit sign pulsed. We rushed toward it, but with each step, the air felt heavier charged, as if something was watching us, waiting to pounce. Then, just as we reached the door, a loud crash echoed through the hallway. I spun around, eyes wide. From the shadows emerged the figure in the hospital gown again. But this time it moved with purpose, a wraith gliding steadily towards us. Run! I screamed, and we bolted toward the door, my fingers trembling as they fumbled for the handle. It rattled but wouldn't budge. It felt locked from the other side. Come on! Susan cried as she tugged at the door, panic rising in her voice. I turned and saw the figure coming closer, its hollow eyes fixated on us. I could feel the despair wash over me again, trying to pull me into its abyss. No, not now. I gritted my teeth and pushed against the door. In a sudden burst of desperation, I slammed my shoulder against it. The door rattled, and to my shock, it gave way slightly. Push! I yelled. We hurled ourselves against it, and the door creaked open, barely wide enough to slip through. I rushed ahead, grabbing Susan by the arm, feeling cold air rush past us as we tumbled into the hallway. Did we lose it? Susan asked breathlessly as I slammed the door behind us, pressing my weight against it. I don't know, I panted. Behind us, the moans began to morph into a low, menacing laughter that sent chills down my spine. With a glance back at the door, fear clawed at me again. Where do we go now? Then something caught my eye. Down the hall, a light flickered, different from the fluorescent bulbs. It was soft and inviting, like a beacon through the darkness. Without another thought, I pointed. There. We need to get to that light. We hurried down the corridor, but as we approached, I realized it was coming from an open doorway. A strange symbol was painted on the doorframe, an intricate design I didn't recognize. That's not good, Susan whispered, halting in her tracks. Before I could respond, I heard the whispers again, growing louder and more desperate. You shouldn't have come back. The voice felt closer, wrapping around us like a net. But just as I was about to back away, something shifted in the doorway. The figure emerged, but this time it was different. It didn't look menacing. It looked familiar. Who are you? I breathed, confusion clouding my thoughts. I know why you're here, the figure said, stepping into the light, revealing a face I recognized, someone I had lost long ago. My heart dropped. Wait, is that? Then everything began to spiral. Chapter 7. The figure stepped closer, and I felt a mix of disbelief and terror wash over me. Is it really you? I whispered, my heart racing. It was her, my sister, Sarah. I hadn't seen her in years, not since that horrible accident. Why have you come back? She asked, her voice echoing eerily, like something out of a dream. But it wasn't a dream. The basement was as real as the dread pooling in my stomach. Sarah, I was looking for you, I stammered, trying to make sense of it all. I glanced back at Susan, who looked equally bewildered. We need to get out of here. Do you not see? Sarah urged, her expression shifting from familiarity to something darker. You shouldn't be here. It's too late. What do you mean? I asked, stepping forward. What happened to you? Susan grabbed my arm, pulling me back. This isn't real. Can't be. Her voice trembled with fear, but my eyes were locked on Sarah. Tell me the truth. What happened to you? I was taken, she said, her words barely a whisper. This place, it traps souls. You have to leave before it traps you too. Suddenly, a cacophony of laughter erupted from the darkness behind Sarah. It echoed ominously, reverberating throughout the hall, drowning out her voice. They're coming, she warned, looking past me. You need to go. Before I could respond, shadows spilled into the light. Figures in hospital gowns emerged, their faces obscured by darkness. Panic rose in my chest. Wait, I shouted, but I felt a pull toward my sister, a desperate need to understand. Don't. Sarah's voice sliced through the chaos. You have to trust me. A cold mist wafted over us, wrapping around my legs. I felt paralyzed, fear locking my feet to the ground. Susan surged forward, grabbing my hand. We can't stay here. We have to move. She tugged me along, leading me further down the hallway as the other figures began to close in. I glanced back at Sarah, but she had already retreated into the shadows, her face fading like a dying ember. Is she really gone? I asked, panting as we ran. I don't know, Susan gasped, her breath ragged. But we need to keep going. This place, it's like a maze. As we turned the corner, I noticed another door, this one slightly ajar. A sliver of light spilling out. In there, I urged. We dashed toward the door, but just as we reached it, the low laughter echoed again, more sinister this time. It felt like the walls were closing in on us. The figure from before flickered at the end of the hall, its hollow eyes watching, waiting. What if we don't make it? Susan whispered, dread clutching her throat. We will, I replied, forcing my voice to hold steadiness. We can't give up. With one final push, I threw the door open, almost praying it would lead us to freedom. But as we stepped inside, everything went dark. Then, I felt the ground shift beneath me. A new chill settled in the air. What now? I whispered, the sound swallowed by the darkness. That's when I saw it, an answer swirling in the void, a horrifying truth that threatened to swallow us whole. Chapter 8. The air around us thinned, and as I squinted into the void, I saw flickers of movement. Shapes twisted and shifted, cloaked in an impenetrable blackness. My heart raced as I grabbed Susan's hand tighter. "What is this?" I croaked. "I don't know," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "But I can feel something watching us." A shiver ran down my spine. Just as I was about to respond, a sudden flash of light erupted, illuminating the space around us for a brief moment. I saw faces twisted, anguished, a chilling reminder of what Sarah had said. Souls trapped, forever bound to this darkness. "It's true," I breathed. "This place, it really does trap souls." My stomach twisted with fear. I couldn't shake the thought of Sarah being trapped here alongside them. The light flickered again, and I glimpsed a figure standing at the far end of the room, a woman in a hospital gown, her hair matted and eyes wide with terror. "Help me!" she screamed, her voice cutting through the darkness. "Do you see her?" Susan asked, trembling beside me. "I do," I replied, glancing between Susan and the woman. "She needs our help." "But what if it's a trap?" Susan's eyes darted around. "What if they're just playing with us?" Before I could answer, the woman let out another desperate cry. "You have to find the key, please, before it's too late." Something about her plea felt genuine, pulling at my heartstrings. "What key? Where?" I shouted, hoping for a clearer answer. But the woman was gone. Just like that, swallowed by the darkness. I could hear the echo of her fading cries, mingling with a distant, haunting laughter. "What now?" Susan asked, panic rising in her voice. "We find the key," I said firmly, uncertainty driving my words. "If we can find it, we might be able to help the others. Maybe even get out of here. How do we even know where to start?" I looked around, heartsick from the chaos. There had to be something, some clue. That was when I felt a gentle tug on my arm. "Over here." A whisper echoed behind me, barely audible against the mounting terror. I turned to see a small gap in the wall, almost hidden in shadow. "Did you hear that?" I asked Susan. She nodded, her eyes wide. "It sounded like a child. Let us check it out," I said, heart racing again. We moved cautiously toward the opening, hoping whatever lay beyond might lead us to that much-needed key. As we pressed through, the darkness thickened around us again. I caught a glimpse of a small room, cluttered with faded toys and forgotten memories. But the atmosphere was so heavy with despair. Suddenly, a soft giggle echoed from the corner. My breath froze. I had been so focused on finding the key that I had overlooked a critical warning. The unseen presence that always lurked in the dark. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. The giggle turned into low laughter that sounded almost mocking. "You shouldn't have come here." The voice sent chills racing down my spine. I turned to Susan, who was now looking increasingly uneasy. "We need to go, right now," she urged. But before we could move, the toys around us began to shake violently, and the laughter grew louder. My instincts screamed to run, but something dark and powerful surged through the room, freezing us in place. Then I heard it, a voice cutting through the chaos. "You cannot escape. You belong to us now." A wave of dread washed over me. The realization hit hard. The key was not just for others' release. It was for my own salvation. Suddenly, the floor trembled beneath us, and I felt the ground starting to split apart. I had no idea where this chase for the key would lead us next, but I knew we were running out of time. The ground continued to shake beneath us, and I felt my heart racing as the room trembled. Desperation clouded my mind. "We have to find a way out," I cried, panic rising in my chest. The laughter intensified, echoing like thunder, and it felt as if the walls were closing in, threatening to swallow us whole. Just then, from the corner of my eye, I caught a flash of light, a small glimmer coming from under a pile of dusty toys in the far corner. "Over there." I pointed, heart pounding as I sprinted toward it, hoping against hope for anything that might help us. Susan hesitated a moment but quickly followed my lead, the fear etched in her expression fueling my urgency. I knelt beside the pile, heart racing as I began to dig through the remnants of faded childhood. The laughter still echoed through the shadows, but I focused, pushing aside forgotten dolls and broken building blocks. Finally, my fingers grazed something cold and metallic, a small key, tarnished and worn. I could be sworn it hummed with energy as I pulled it free, the weight in my hand heavy with expectation. "I think I found it," I shouted to Susan, who gasped in relief yet maintained her wary gaze on the shadows closing in around us. "But what do we do with it?" she asked, edging toward me. The darkness seemed to pulse with a life of its own, creeping closer with every heartbeat. "I don't know," I admitted, my brain buzzing with uncertainty. Maybe it unlocks something. Maybe it's a way out." The laughter exploded again, deafening, as if mocking our hope. "There's got to be a door," I yelled, forcing my eyes to search the encroaching blackness, desperate for a hint of salvation. "Look," Susan pointed, her voice tense. "That doorway over there." I turned to see a faint flicker of light behind a far door, just on the edge of sight. "Let us go." And with a rush of adrenaline, we sprinted toward it, the darkness clawing at our heels, eager to drag us back into the void. We skidded to a halt before the door. I twisted the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Frantically, I looked at Susan, who was breathing heavily, her fear tangible. "The key. Try the key," she urged, her eyes wide. I fumbled for the small artifact, heart racing as if it might leap from my grip. With shaking hands, I inserted the key into the lock, my breath held in anticipation. I turned the key, feeling a faint resistance at first, but then the lock clicked, echoing through the silence like a death knell. I pushed the door open, and a blaze of light poured out, momentarily blinding my eyes. "Go," I exclaimed, shoving Susan through ahead of me before I stepped in, feeling the warmth envelop us as we crossed the threshold. We stumbled into a wide room bathed in sunlight, a stark contrast to the darkness we had just escaped. The laughter was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. I turned around to see the door behind us still ajar, the shadows reaching toward us, reluctant to let go. "Did it work?" Susan asked, searching the room for signs of danger. I didn't answer at first, still processing everything. Felt too good to be true, too abrupt. My heart raced as I looked at the room, just a regular storage area filled with hospital supplies and forgotten equipment. "We're out for now," I said cautiously, uncertain if the nightmare truly was over. But then I noticed the reflection in a nearby mirror. A pale figure dressed in a hospital gown, just like the others, was standing behind me, gazing through the glass. "Help us," it mouthed silently, hauntingly. I whipped around, but there was nothing there. My blood ran cold. "Did you see that?" I whispered, bewildered. Susan's face paled, and she slowly nodded. And just like that, the gentle warmth of sunlight began to wane, shadows creeping back. "No, not again," I thought frantically. "Let us get out of here," Susan urged, her eyes darting around for another escape. I wanted to run, but it was clear the darkness had not truly given up. "I don't think we're done," I murmured. "Not yet." As we moved cautiously toward the exit, a sense of dread flooded me. What had we really escaped? Was it just a temporary reprieve? We stepped into the hallway, leaving behind the light. With each step we took, I could feel strange whispers curling around our thoughts, beckoning, taunting. I could still see hints of the white dress flitting in and out of sight, like a memory refusing to leave. "I don't think I'm ready to talk about what happened," I admitted as we made our way toward the hospital doors, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing down on me. "But I do know one thing." "What's that?" Susan asked, glancing back at the room we had fled. "I still feel trapped," I said, riddled with uncertainty. I paused by the exit, taking a deep breath as we pushed the door open. Outside, the world was bright and disorienting. But the feeling of dread remained in the back of my mind, an unanswered question looming over me, refusing to let go. "Let us go home," Susan said softly, but the shadows loomed still and I couldn't shake the feeling that they might follow us. As I glanced back one last time, I couldn't help but wonder if we had truly escaped or simply drawn a new line between ourselves and the darkness that lingered just out of sight. As I stepped outside, my heart still raced, caught in a web of questions I wished I could answer. Whatever darkness dwelled in St. Mary's Hospital had not been vanquished. It merely lay in wait. I moved forward, knowing that old scars have a way of never quite fading, and some echoes have a way of lingering long after the light has returned.